Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC and today I'm back with one of the most requested cars for the channel. It's this incredible Mark 1 Ford Cortina. Now it isn't just any Ford Cortina either, it is a Ford Cortina GT. That makes it top of the range. It has lots of additional extras and bits and pieces which I'll tell you about in today's video, and it's got one of the best owner's stories I have ever featured on this channel. So stay tuned because we're about to go and look at this 1966 Ford Cortina GT. Ford produced some absolutely belting cars in the 60s, and the Ford Cortina came to market in September 62. And it was Britain's second best-selling car of the decade, which makes it a classic that we definitely should have had on the channel way before today. And if you're wondering what pipped it to the post as number one, it was the ADO 16, which we've already reviewed. Now the Cortina was a Ford of Britain car, so that was before, if you remember, we talked about it in one of the videos about how Ford all came together, and that's how the Ford Escort launched. This was just a Ford of Britain car. Now it came to market to attract the buyers of two particular British cars, the Oxford Farina and the Vauxhall Victor. Now both of these cars were pretty good and they were very strong competitors. So Ford said, well, what we need to do is we need to design a car which is economical, cheap to run and easy and cheap to produce. And that way we'll really take the market share. And they didn't do a bad job of it, coming in at number 2, and later on with other marks coming in as best-selling car of the 70s. So the front-wheel drive car, which was known at first under the project name of Archbishop, which doesn't roll as well off the tongue as Cortina, was initially available in two specs at launch, the Standard or the Deluxe. Now both specs had the 1198cc Kent engine, which had been used in the Anglia Super, and in fact it was in the Anglia that we tested last year. The overhead valve engine was used alongside Ford's known commodities, so they used that 4-speed synchro box, McPherson strut suspension setup, and it's worth noting that you may have seen an auto, but the Borgwater auto box wasn't available until later on in 1963. Unlike other big motoring names of the time, Ford didn't really sit around and wait for things to happen or for a new model appear to make timely updates, and the first updates went out in early 1963, and this is where they updated the Cortina lineup. So the new lineup saw the 1500 Super added to the range, and then the car that everyone's talking about and that we're testing today, the Ford Cortina GT. The GT was fitted as standard with twin choke Weber carb, discs to front, remote gear change as I'll show you later in the video, and modified suspension. The GT was fitted with the 1500 engine and it was tuned, and it gave an output of allegedly, and I think it's been tested and proven, 78 brake horsepower. Now of course they also had the 1500 fitted in the Super, but that was only knocking out 60 brake horsepower. Now it is also worth mentioning that it wasn't just all of that going on to make the GT faster and a better car. It also had a different camshaft profile and a superior cylinder head casting which had larger ports, and of course those tubular exhaust headers. 63 wasn't just the year of the GT, it also saw the launch of the Estate and the Lotus Cortina. There's a very nice Lotus Cortina at work actually, which I do keep eyeing up, and they are decidedly more expensive than these lovely GTs, so if you do fancy one, perhaps go for the GT. Now the range continued to be updated, and it is worth mentioning these changes because along with being a 66 car and a GT, you get to see some of the big changes brought about across the entire range in 1964. Now these changes included front discs going from just the GT as standard to all models as standard, a redesigned front grille, and the aeroflow ventilation system. So we're going to show you that later on. It looks decidedly space age, but essentially it brings fresh air into the car without the windows needing to be open. Now as we noted from launch, the GT had those front discs. So because of course that was going across the whole range and they needed to keep the GT as having all these extras, they then went and looked at the whole GT braking system and in '64 it was revised and it gave the car larger front discs and self-adjusting rear brakes. Mark 1 production came to an end in October '66, and that's when Ford beckoned in the Mark 2. Although the Cortina is a rare spot in the UK today, at the time it was an incredibly popular car, and in fact it sold over 1 million units in the first 4 years of production. Now, I realise that this is a very small look at the Cortina and the Cortina GT. There are plenty of books that you can go and buy on Amazon or good independent booksellers to give you far more information. Of course, we have a very short time on YouTube, so we've just given you a basic summary. Now, the Cortina today is supported across all the marques with an owners club, and there is also a club existing solely for the Mark 1 Cortina, should you wish to purchase one and join a club full of great knowledge and support. I have had a look at their website, it's very good, and I did get a fair few facts for this video off there, so thank you very much whoever put that together. Now, before I show you the inside of the car, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the owner and the history of this particular car, because for me it's one of the best stories that we've ever had on the channel. Well, I would have really have liked the lady who owns this car to have been on camera. She's called Margaret, and her son Joe is one of my best friends, and this car probably has one of the best stories in their family and one of the best automotive stories I've ever heard in my entire life, because it has followed the whole family through their entire journey as the Sheraton unit. So way back when Andy and Margaret met in the 1980s, Andy knew that Margaret was the lady to impress. So on her 19th birthday, they'd been to a Ford Escort, and it'd been rotten, by the way. He went out and he saw this Cortina GT that he'd heard about through a friend of a friend or something or other, and it was £30. And Andy said, GT, that's top of the range. That is the one to be getting. I mean, we all definitely agree today that it's definitely the one to have. And he went out with his £30 and he went to go and see the car. Now, the suspension at the front had gone haywire, so the bonnet was all ruckled up and it looked far worse than it was, according to Andy, but he's a lot more calm than me when it comes to car repairs. I think I probably would have panicked as well. And when he went to get in it, it wouldn't start. It was like, But Andy, being the calm man that he was, he said, let's just tow it home, see what's wrong with it. They towed it home. Turned out it just had no petrol in. So very quickly it became the dependable family car, and it has done all sorts of roles in Joe's family. It's been the workhorse, it's been Andy's daily driver, it's been Margaret's daily driver, it's taken Joe, his brother and his sister to school, and it's even had a little starring role, because if you've ever been to Goodwood Revival, you'll have seen this on the Glam Cab stand. And in fact, if you type the registration plate off the front of the car into Google, you'll see no end of images across different news articles where you've got these Glam Cab girls draped all over it. And it's so funny because you think, that's Joe's family car. It's really strange. But yes, we're here today in 2021, and you know, Joe and his siblings are fully grown up. Andy and Margaret are now proper adults. And the car is still with the family. It still performs regular duties. It gets taken out. Not so much anymore. It's not so much a daily driver, but she is still used in those fair weather months. And for me, that's such a lovely story, because we often talk about custodians and how cars are more than just cars. And it's so nice to meet a car that has joined a family and been with them throughout their entire time together. And I wanted to share that with you. And it would have been nice to have Margaret on, but just like Joe, she doesn't like coming on our Driver Classic videos. I mean, it is a bit bizarre sometimes talking about your own car. Now, we've talked all about this being a GT, and I talked a little bit about those changes as well in 1964, but let me show you some of it in the flesh. So first of all, we know this is a GT as soon as we open the door, because that chrome capping around those door cards was only ever put onto the GTs. We've also got that air vent over there. That's part of that aeroflow system that we talked about being introduced in 1964. We've got quite a sizable glove box as well. So as you can see there, you've got all your bits and pieces inside, including some of the original paperwork for the car. And as we come into the centre, it starts to become far more obvious that this is a GT. We've got those 4 dials across the top there, and on a normal Cortina, so on your lower specs, that tends to be just kind of a bit of a blank area. Or is it? No, I think that's where they put the ashtray. Haven't seen one in ages. And coming down here, you've got your radio. Now, of course, this would have been an optional extra. We don't know when this was put in. So Joe says that he doesn't remember a time without it being in the car. And looking at the booklet for the car, it doesn't have the radio warranty filled in. So my Inspector Gadget head would tell me that this was probably put in after the car was purchased. Now, to the left of that over there is the choke, and to the right we've got the cigar lighter. So it's really nice actually, because it's the original. But as you can see, someone's really enjoyed quite a few cigarettes with that. Is there anything more vile than smoking in a car? I hate it. I wish people wouldn't do it. Over to the right hand side of that is our window washer, and above that is our windscreen wipers. And coming over to the right hand side, we've got our headlight switch. Is it a criticism? Is it not a criticism? Do I think that I would have preferred those to be a bit more chromy? I think I would actually. They feel a bit, I don't know, all the other controls are quite sturdy, but it's a very small complaint on a very nice car. And the horn is being a little bit of a devil today, so what I'm going to do is when we go out for a drive, I'm going to try and show you the horn then. Steering wheel is a Mark II, of course, and then we've got a couple of other bits and pieces. So we've got the umbrella handbrake. Now the reason we've got that is because when you went onto the GT, you've got this console section here and this amazing, I love this armrest. It's like having a second glove box. You've got loads of room in there. Fantastic. So you've got this here, and then you've got your remote gear stick. Now if you've ever been in an Anglia, you're not going to be talking about now. So you've got the aeroflow system under here, which was, as we talked about earlier, and that's where your gear stick would have come out on, like kind of from there, a little bit like that Anglia. So this was really only something that you would have seen on a GT. So it felt like when I got in the car that there was loads of stuff to talk to you about, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And of course there's another little detail which I always love on Fords of this era, is this headlining and material that they've used on the sun visors, and it's those little stars again that we saw in the Anglia, because of course at this stage of Ford, prior to it being official Ford of Europe, you had that strapline of Ford 5-star motoring, so you can see those little stars. Now I'm going to take you out for a drive in this Cortina, and actually, controversially, I think it might be my favourite Ford that I've taken out. I've only ever been a passenger until today, and I've always been a little bit nervous about driving this car because of its history, because of how important it is to the family, and I feel enormously privileged to be allowed to have the keys today, so much more so than anything else I've driven in quite some time. So of course we have got that 1.5 under the bonnet, so I'm going to pop the key in for you. It's a right devil to get in because it is a replacement key. I said to Joe, where's the original key? He went, I don't know. Right, let me get this key in and I'm going to start the car up for you. Well, apparently it's user error on my part because the key doesn't go in very far. Right, are we ready? Shall we see what we can get out of this? Why does this sound so much better than any of my cars? Love this car. Right, we'll pop out and we'll shoot from the exhaust as well, so you can hear what it sounds like from outside. just like that, and smooth as cutting through butter with a hot knife, we are up into fourth gear. Now, one of the things that really struck me about this car, and that I found both interesting as a driver and a passenger, is that there are so many cars of this era that you get into, and it's like or bang, 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 bang somewhere, or something's leaking, or something's knocking. This, when you're driving it and as a passenger, even when you're listening for noises, it's absolutely flawless. And to say it was a car that was built for economy and to provide people with affordable motoring, it certainly feels like a car that's built with far more care than people that brand them as Dagenham dustbins. Now, the great joy about these engines is, the 1.5s, is that because we've got that little bit of extra power than those smaller engines, is that we can quite easily keep up with the modern traffic. And in fact, my foot is barely touching the pedal and she's just gliding along. I'm going to upset a few Ford Escort owners here, but I've driven a Mark 1 Escort and I've driven this Cortina, and I need to just know, why are we all so excited about the Escort when the Cortina is just such an incredible car? Now, we talked about that suspension being slightly different on the GT, and I think that as you drive it, and we've been going over a few speed bumps on our drive today, it's far more polished, it's far nicer than I think most people would anticipate before they get in. We're on steering box with this, which is pretty common for the time with Ford. They hadn't really moved on to rack and pinion. But again, as you come through, steering's very light, very responsive. It's just really quite a dream to drive. And I think as well, one of the things that is a bit of a double-edged sword of 60s cars is that they are all, quite run-of-the-mill, your normal stuff is all quite compact, it's quite small and put together. And sometimes when you're a larger human, you can get into them and feel a little bit claustrophobic. But as you can see here, I've got all this room, I've got the armrest. It's not just the mechanics of it that make it an enjoyable driving experience. It's the seating position, it's the space around you as both the driver and the passenger. And I'm sure that you glimpsed when we were looking around the inside of the car that my passengers in the back as well, so essentially kids, have got plenty of room as well. It's a really well laid out car. People are so obsessed with the Escort, when for me the Cortina feels just all round a far more pleasurable car. For me, I much prefer this. People go nuts about the Anglias, and I know it's got the Harry Potter connection, but the Cortina just feels like a far more versatile vehicle. It feels like something that you can grow with as well, so you can enjoy yourself when you're out for a drive. It's so cool, isn't it? And it's also something you can take all your friends out in. It's got plenty of luggage space. This for me is the best of those mid-century 50s, 60s and early 70s Fords. I don't think I'm going to find anything I prefer. I really like the Corsair, that was great. I've got a real fondness for Joe's Anglia. I love that Zodiac. We had a Mark 1 Escort in work, loved that as well. But for me, this is the pinnacle of Ford in that era. This is just glorious. Because this is the era of cars that people seem to be buying into massively at the moment, we're seeing a real drop-off in that 40s and 50s stuff. When I'm putting it on videos, when I'm talking to people about it, people aren't as excited as they are about that 60s, 70s, 80s and sometimes 90s stuff. We've seen a real scene switch in the last 10 years, and with it, the price of cars like this, and the price of Cortinas actually, has gone bonkers. You can't buy one of these now as just something that you maybe save up for a year for. There's something that you really, really have to work towards, which I really wish that I'd gone and got a Ford way back when I started driving, because Morris Minors, I could still afford one of those. But one of these, it's a real dream car driving experience. I do have one negative. I would really like a fifth gear, because as you can see, as I'm really putting my foot down, as you would be, it's the GT. That fifth gear, I think, would just add something. That's probably my only very small criticism of what is actually, yeah, my favourite car that I have tested this year. I love the story behind it. I love driving it. I love how she looks. There's nothing for me that could be improved on this Cortina GT. Now it's time for me to take the car home, not because I want to, because if I could, I wouldn't be driving this car back to Joe's mum at all. I would drive away and never be seen again. But it's time for me to head back. It's been an absolute pleasure showing you this car. It's put a smile on my face. I hope it's put a smile on yours. And until next Sunday, when we meet again, take care and drive safely.